Hello, I'm Caden Lamb, and I'm presenting you the Surplus X project and the UML diagram. Here we have our escrow protection flow. This is our first diagram. You see that on the far left, we have 4 swim lanes, which is the buyer, the escrow service, the payment gateway, and the seller. Each lanes represent different participants in the transaction, and activities flow from the left to right. Here is the initiation phase. The process starts when the buyer agrees to purchase and initiates payment. This triggers a request to our escrow service to hold the funds, where it says funds protected over here. Now here's the critical part. Notice the orange dashboard labeled funds protected. So this is where we hold the funds when we process a transaction. The escrow service receives the payment request and immediately coordinates with the payment gateway to verify the transaction. Once verified, the funds are processed and held securely in escrow. This is a key protection mechanism. The money is not going directly to the seller yet, and the buyer is committed with their payment. Next is the fulfillment phase. With the funds secured, the escrow service notifies the seller that the payment is held and that they can proceed with shipping. The seller then ships the goods to the buyer. Next is the verification phase. Once the shipment arrives, the buyer confirms delivery. This confirmation is critical. It's the trigger for releasing funds. Here we have the decision point. Right here. This is where we decide to see if this customer is satisfied. If it's yes, then that's the happy path. The funds are released from the escrow. The payment gateway transfers the money to the seller's account, and the transaction completes successfully. Everyone is satisfied. But if not, down here, perhaps that there's a quality issue or the goods never arrived, the escrow can refund the buyer. The dashed line represents the dispute or cancellation path. Next is diagram 2. Here we have on the left another 4 swim lanes. We have the seller, the platform system, the shipping carrier, and the buyer. Here is the automated label generator. This process begins when the seller requests a shipping label. Here's when our platform automation shines. Notice this green highlighted box. Instead of the seller manually creating labels or dealing with the carrier websites, our platform system automatically generates the shipping labels by integrating with the carrier's APIs. The label is returned to the seller, who prints it and prepares it to the package. This saves significant time and reduces error. Carrier handoff and tracking. The seller hands off the package to the carrier, who scans it and begins updating the shipment status. Notice the connection here? The carrier continuously sends status updates back to our platform system. We're monitoring, tracking events in real time. Next is the notifications. Our platform system sends status notifications to the buyer, keeping them informed throughout the journey. The buyer can actively track the shipment, and meanwhile, the carrier is moving the package to the transit to the final delivery. See this red box that says disputation? This is dispute resolution. Now here's something really important. And here's a diamond that basically says, if there's an issue detected. If yes, it goes into dispute resolution, and if it says no, it goes down over here, and your delivery is confirmed. And if it goes to the dispute resolution, we collect all evidence from all parties, mediate between buyer and seller, and work toward a fair resolution. Next is the third diagram. Here is the contract automation, generation, and finalization. Here on the far left, we have 4 different swim lanes. Top one is the transaction system, the second one is the contract service, the third one is the verification system, and the fourth one is the document storage. The process starts when the transaction completes successfully. The transaction system verifies that all conditions are met. The delivery is confirmed, payments processed, no disputes. Once verified, it triggers contract generation. This purple highlighted area shows our automated contract generation pipeline. First, the contract service gathers all transaction data: who is the buyer, who is the seller, what was purchased, and how much, when, etc. Then it loads an appropriate contract template. We have different templates based on transaction types, product categories, and legal jurisdictions. Next, the system populates the template with all the transaction specific terms and conditions. It generates a formatted PDF contract and applies digital signatures from both parties using cryptographic methods. Here is the automated verification. Now, while the contract is being generated, we're also running parallel verification processes shown in the highlighted orange box. The verification system is checking three things: terms accuracy, legal compliance, and hash signature. And if all three are yes, we proceed to the storage and finalization. Right here. Once the verification passes, the finalized contract is stored in two places: blockchain and document database. And overall, the diagram 1 shows how our escrow protection system builds trust by securing funds until delivery is confirmed, protecting both buyers and sellers. Diagram 2 demonstrates our logistics and tracking capabilities, including automated label generation, real-time monitoring, and proactive dispute resolution. Diagram 3 illustrates how we are automatically generate, verify, and archive legal contracts for every completed transaction. Together, these three capabilities form the backbone of the Surplus X settlement and logistics module. They address the core pain points in surplus inventory, liquidation, trust, operational efficiency, and legal compliance. Thank you for listening to my presentation.
Hi, I'm Philip Ryan, and I will be going over the user interface portion of this project, specifically as it relates to wireframes. And so the idea in this portion of the project is that through the wireframes, through the company website, employees can do, well, they can really do two things. One is to manage the escrow accounts, and two is to resolve disputes relating to shipping and and account status. Beginning with the classic login screen, employees can enter the username and password and log into the account, log into the Surplus X website, where it takes them to the employee menu, which lists out all the active escrow accounts. Now these accounts can be sorted by status here on the left, and the idea is that if, say, an escrow account was just created after a deal was finalized by a buyer and seller, it can be filtered by requested. The employee can then enter the contract ID, and that takes them down to the account details screen, where it displays the automatically generated contract here on the right hand of the screen, the basic account details at the top, and then also allows the employee the ability to release funds from the escrow account or hold funds if there is an issue that is spotted with the account details or with the deal in general. On this screen, you can also go to back to the main screen. However, going on to the shipment details, this is where the employee can see all the shipment details of the item or of the deal in question, make sure that everything is correct, and then confirm the details and generate shipping labels using this button here. Now, the nice thing is that because if we look at the buyer view, information here, as well as the seller view and the information here, the website can automatically generate all these shipping labels. So all the employee for Surplus X needs to do is just view the details, verify that everything looks good, that there's no issues there, and generate the labels. In addition, the screen also shows the status of a shipment. So if a product has been shipped, it can show the location where the product is through a shipment tracking, the expected delivery date, as well as a map showing the geographic location of the goods in transit. And if there If the shipping status needs to be updated, the employee can just click this button down here, which then takes them to this page where a shipping status can be updated. Now, the most crucial aspect of this page is the shipping conflict resolution section in the middle here. Now, this is where an employee, if there is a conflict status with the shipment or with the deal in general, the employee can see the contract details as the conflict details as they're written out, and they can change the status of the conflict and enter the notes to resolve it as they see fit. Whether this be if a refund needs to be issued, or if say goods were delivered to a wrong address, if the seller needs to reship the proper goods to the correct address, anything of that nature, they can enter it here in the change status in the notes section, and then click this button to update the status. Now, what we're trying to do here, the strategy that we're going for here with only having really 4 frames, four, yeah, 4 pages that an employee needs to manage is efficiency through simplicity. It's a less is more approach, whereby only having a login page and then 4 separate pages with with management capabilities, that the employees can be trained faster, and that there will be far less issues that arise with any sort of from employees becoming confused with an overcomplicated system. It's very much just bare bones. It gets done what needs to get done and nothing more. And it goes through a simplicity, through efficiency through simplicity approach. And what makes this possible is the fact that this all relies on an escrow system. An escrow system is a system which incentivizes both buyers and sellers to try and complete things as efficiently as possible, because the seller, they've already paid for the goods through the escrow account, and they've already lost their money, and they're not going to get it back unless it's like something goes bad on the seller's end. And the seller doesn't get the money until their goods are delivered to the buyer. So they have an incentive to try and get their goods delivered as fast as possible without any errors. So all this relies on both buyers and sellers essentially acting with goodwill towards each other, because it is in their self-interest to act with goodwill. And this is what allows for such a simple management system.
Hi, I'm Victor, and I'm going to be walking through the settlement and logistics enhanced entity relationship diagram for the Surplus X platform. I'm just going to be explaining how the entities are work together and support secure payment, shipments, and dispute resolutions between buyers and sellers. So at the top we have sellers and buyers. And when they both agree that they want to do business together, a contract is automatically generated. Each seller has a name, company name, email, bank account, and warehouse. And buyer has the same, except for different is a payment method and a shipping address. So a buyer technically buys a contract, and the seller will create one automatically, even though the contract is finalized after the funds in the escrow account are sent through and the shipment is sent. But I'll get through that later. So at the center we have the contract entity. It's where every deal between a buyer and seller is formalized. It includes the buyer's signature, seller signature, the date generated, date finalized, and the contract status. Um, Connected to the contract is the escrow account, the shipment, and the dispute. The escrow account is where all the funds from the buyer are held until the buyer receives the receipt from the seller. And after that point, then the funds will be sent to the seller, and the buyer will receive his product. And including once the funds are sent out of the escrow account, the shipment is also sent out. And if nothing goes wrong, then we won't have to do a dispute. The shipment just includes the tracking number, the carrier name, the shipment label, the status, and the estimated delivery, just so the buyer can know. And if there is a problem that the buyer, say he does not, the shipment was late, it was incomplete, damaged, then that's when the buyer would formulate a dispute. That's where it comes into play. The dispute just shows the buyer ID, seller ID, the reason, the resolution status, and the date opened and resolved. So if a dispute is validated, the system can prevent the release of the funds held in the escrow account so that there's no foul play and the buyer will not get scammed out of his money. And he would just have to create another contract with another seller and go through the whole process again. This just protects the buyer's money and keeps both the buyer and the seller, ensuring fairness between both of them. So overall, in a quick conclusion, the buyer and seller agree on terms and a contract is created but not finalized. The buyer's payment will be escorted into the escrow account. The seller will ship the product and receive a receipt in which the seller will give it to the buyer. If everything goes well, the funds go to the seller. Everyone gets their product. Everyone's happy. If not, the buyer will create a dispute in which he can either get his money back safely because of the funds held in an escrow account to where the seller does not have them. And this whole diagram just ensures that there's transparency between both the seller and the buyer, and it also strengthens Surplus X's platform by offering not only financial security, but shipment visibility and a great formal dispute mechanism. Thank you.
Alrighty, starting off with the information from what was given about the Surplus X, I believe is our company we're working with, the information they gave us. So looking at the cost estimation sheet here, the amount of developers days they gave us was about 1,095 days, so that's translates to roughly about 3.5 years roughly. Yeah, about 3.5 years of work we were able to do. And we found that through, of course, each year has 364 sometimes, depending on how the year is working that year. But 365 times 3, it gives us about a 3-year horizon. So that's where we got that 1,095 from. And then the average cost of the developers per day, we got 800. This was just from what the case showed us. And then next up, we got our developmental labor cost. We got the value of $876,000 from doing our number of developer days times our average cost day, which was 800, and when you do that, that's where we get our value, 876,000. And then of course we have some other non-labor developmental costs that could be like utilities, the services we're paying for, and this was provided by the case description, and it was about $30,000. And then this is where we get our total development cost, $906,000. We add the developmental labor cost, and then the non-labor developmental cost. Sorry about that. And that's how we get $906,000. Continuing on forward, the regular upgrades and maintenance. This will be like upgrading computers, maintaining them, maintaining the building itself. That was about $15,000, and that was provided by the case description. And the same thing for the AWS hosting costs. The cost of the modules backend, that was provided by the case description, giving us $20,000. When we do the sum of that, our total running cost is $35,000. Moving forward to the benefit estimation, we're going to have about 1,000 transactions. I believe this was per year, and that was provided by the case description. And then the average revenue per transaction was about $1,500, again provided by the case description. And then our annual revenue, we get that by doing the sum of the number of transactions and the average revenue per transactions. We get the sum of those. So we'll multiply 10,000 by 1,500. That'll give us 15 million. That's our annual revenue. And then the annual operating cost, it was provided by the case description. And it didn't let us know if it was an annual operating cost or if it was a daily operating cost, maybe a weekly. However, this was the only value they gave us for operating cost. It didn't specify what it was, so I'm just gonna assume it was annual operating cost. It's about 1.1 million. And then when we do the sum of the annual revenue minus the annual operating cost, our total comes out to $13,900,000. That's how much it's going to cost for everything. And then in terms of the cost savings, this was provided by the case description. We're hoping to save about $15 per transaction, which gives us an efficient, to help make things more efficient. And of course, number of transactions, that's right up here, 10,000 transactions. Each case is going to save us about $15. So we do 10,000 times 15. That'll give us $150,000 in cost savings from all the transactions of the year. And then the transaction growth rate per year, it was about we're at 5%. That was provided by the case description, and then we want to grow up to 10%. So that'll be another 5% increase. So that was provided. Looking at our projections here, though. This is our developmental year 0. That's when we're developing everything, and our transaction. We have 10,000 transactions for that. That's our anticipated transactions, and of course, this was all information that I had just gone over in both the cost estimation and the benefit estimation. For year 1, though, it looks like we're gaining 500 extra transactions, a little more than we were anticipating, but that's okay. We can still make it work. So our revenue, it looks like we gained $750,000 from the extra 500 clients we've gained. So that changes things around. It gets our operating costs a little more expensive. Not too bad though. Extra $55,000. Nothing that doesn't hurt. So our operating cost changes to $14,595,000. And then for year 2, we gain a little more. Year 3, a little more. And then, of course, the chart kind of explains itself. Moving on to the analysis, net profit value analysis part. Additional revenues, of course, year 0 is going to be our year that we're doing developmental costs and developing the software. And moving on from year 1, 2, and 3, we gain a little more each year, but of course our operating costs are going to increase. And then as of currently, we're in year 3, we're currently working on that one, but year 2 is our last recorded record of it. We're about $12,806,712 in our net present value. Alright, moving on to the JIRA portion and our flight plan, understanding how we're going to break the work down. The way I decided to break the work down was we need to make sure we have our main priorities. These are the must-haves we have to have no matter what. So I've decided to break down our flight plans into must-have, should-have, and our could-have. That way, if we're behind on schedule, we don't really have to work on the could-have, but if we have time, we'll add it in. So, as we all know, we're in the settlements and logistics group, so our purchase agreement, that has to be finalized first before anything moves on. So, obviously, looking at the description, before we can move on, we have to have our case description, not the case description. We have to have our agreement from both the buyer and the seller, the contract. That has to be signed before anything goes on. Moving forward, we have to confirm our funds. So if the buyer, if the buyer's fund isn't appropriate, then we won't be able to send the funds to the seller for the seller to make their profit, and that's something they need and something they have to sign in the contract. Releasing the funds to the seller, this is basically just a step where we're releasing the funds to the seller after the transaction has finally gone through and been delivered. We'll hold on to the funds in case anything happens to go wrong. And then our next must-have, we just have to make sure we verify all the conditions have been met. This is to make sure we let our buyer and our seller know that This is before we let our buyer and seller know that everything has been finalized. This is before that notification. So before we can even send that notification or think about sending it, we have to make sure all the conditions have been met. So that's where the verify all conditions have been met. That's what makes it a must-have. And then of course, once everything's been finalized, we have to let both parties know transaction's finalized. And that's why I decided this was a must-have, because we have to let them know it's finalized. If we don't let them know it's finalized, it's just gonna be pending forever. And then these were the should-have sprints. I decided we should have them. We definitely should have them, but they weren't a top priorities from what I was finding out, from what I figured the workload would be. So, our payment process, this is really important, as the buyer has to make sure they input a valid form of payment. That be bank account, credit card, money transfers, whatever the contract wants to pay by. The buyer has to input the correct information before it'll go on. And if the buyer chooses not to do that, the system will try a couple of times, and then it'll just back out. And then for our should-haves, informing our seller the payment. This is something I thought was pretty important, but it wasn't a priority we have to have. So we have to let the seller know that, hey, your payment has finally gone through. The buyer's payment has finally gone through. You better get that shipped out before we refund the seller. Sorry, not the seller, the buyer. And of course, as we know, if the seller doesn't ship that out, the buyer just got scammed, basically. So we'll send some notifications to the seller to ship it within the next amount of days. However, Surplus X wants to do that. And then we have to make sure we confirm the delivery. This is assuming Surplus X is going to use an in-house delivery, not UPS, FedEx, USPS, whatnot. Assuming they're using in-house delivery, we have to make sure that the client's packages have been delivered. So this can be done through photos, could be assigning a form, just some form of validation that the company wants to use. So this is why I chose this as a should have, because we should have it. It's not a huge priority on our list for our sprints, but we should have it. Alright. And of course, if we don't get any verification from them after it's been delivered, it'll be flagging an audit for that delivery driver. Alright. Moving on, the store transactions in the database. This is important because once the transaction has been finalized, if we ever need to go back to it, we need to find a way to go back. And this is why I put it in the should haves, because we're not going to always access it. We're not going to always use it all the time like we are with purchase agreements, confirming the funds, releasing the funds to the seller, verifying conditions, and notifying parties. This isn't something we're going to use every single time. So that's why I put it in the should have. And our package and goods ship. I didn't really know if it fell under our tasks. I mean, like the prompt said, it never really specified if they're using in-house delivery system or if they're using a outsourcing one, but this was pretty much just informing the seller that they're packing the goods and then they'll ship it to the address the buyer gives them. As for the story points, the hardest thing, I did it from a scale of 1 to 10. So our story points, this verifying all the conditions have been met, this is going to be our hardest one because the system has to be able to go all the way back through every single one of these. And then on top of that, it has to go through payment process, inform seller, confirm deliveries, and then it has to go through all three of these up here before it can even verify all the conditions on that have been met. So that's why I put that as a 10. It's going to be pretty hard. Our next hardest thing was confirming the delivery. I decided this one was going to be difficult because there's so much steps to getting this one to work properly, because we have to make sure we can track the driver if it's in-house delivery, and then we have to also make sure that the driver confirms that it's been dropped off, and that'll be where it's the difficult part on getting that worked out. Our next one is going to be payment process. This is wasn't gonna be too crazy hard, but I figured it doesn't hurt to put it as a little more of a difficulty set standard, just because we have to be able to make sure the buyer inputs the correct information. We have to communicate with the bank or with the card holder. So that's just why I put it as an 8. And the rest of them, they weren't too bad, so that's why I put them like under a 5 or so. Thanks for listening.